Just quick little teachings about your health. So let's talk today about joints. This is completely about joint health. Joint health, I think, is an osteoarthritis, degenerative joint disease is a huge, huge issue. Millions of Americans, it's probably guesstimated right now, 25% of Americans, close to that anyway, as of about 2005, 2006, was 20% plus. Now we're well over 20%, have some form of degenerative joint disease, inflammatory processes in their joints, knees, ankles, hands. Now there's two different types, certainly. There's rheumatoid arthritis, which is an autoimmune, which is a self-attacking condition. That's not what we're talking about here today. We're talking here about traditional wear and tear on the joints and what some of the aspects of that are. Why do we break down our joint structures? Well, there can be a lot of issues. There's mechanical, trauma, athletes, folks that play basketball on concrete pavement, runners. There's a lot of mechanical issues. There are joint instability issues from folks that have had joint injuries where they've either damaged cartilage or torn meniscus or have ACL damage, etc., where we've created some joint instability and there's movement, increases friction, now encourages the breakdown process. Now the breakdown process is really what I'm after here today. The breakdown process is critical because we're actually designed and we're created to be able to repair that tissue. Now certainly there's at some point in time a point of no return, but our bodies are made to be able to repair that. So there's some basic things that we have to understand. As we age, then either trauma to the joints, poor diet, which I'll discuss, that joint structure begins to break down. We actually secrete some enzymes that are not actually bad. They're actually there and designed to start creating some form of breakdown and removal of debris. For some of us, though, either to some genetic dispositions, so on, we don't really know, that degradation takes place at a much higher and a much faster rate. So we wear down joints more quickly. The other aspect is that we traumatize the joints and we don't do things to repair and heal. So let's focus today on joint structure, what happens to these joints, and what you can do to prevent future problems. So let's start with the ABCs. Let's make sure we hydrate well. Our joints need hydration. Chiropractors can tell you this, physical therapists will tell you this. We need adequate hydration because fluid in the joints aids in stability and cushioning of the joints. What about this enzyme degradation? What do you mean it's happening more in one versus the other? Well, the problem is that many of us do not understand the role of proteolytic enzymes, using enzymes, systemic enzymes that we take in, and eating whole foods that have a lot of enzymes. The other aspect is inflammation. We produce a ton of inflammation depending upon our diet. Many of us consume entirely too much sugar, too many refined products. This encourages further joint destruction. So our joints are designed to repair and heal. What is one of the mechanisms? Collagen matrix. Why I'm a huge fan of the buffered C ascorbates. Because collagen matrix, that is a precursor, glycosaminoglycans. We'll talk about glucosamine maybe in the next little teaching. But you need to understand, first of all, there are certain things that you can do. We can't wait until we're 50-something, 60-something, 70-something. We already have a significant amount of joint breakdown, joint inflammation. These enzymes are degrading the joints. Cartilage has eroded. And now I want to restore the joints. You should really be in a proactive mode of preparing for the potential for joint destruction. How do I do that? I must make sure that I have healthy joint structures to begin with, and if there are some instability issues, whatever, I medically should have that handled. Number two, we should do exercises and physical therapy that strengthen all the musculature and the ligaments. We need to stretch. Recent studies show that a lot of ACL and MCL injuries in young athletes, especially girls, can be avoided to a great degree with significant amount of stretching and movement and strengthening exercises that help to strengthen all of the structural supports. The ABCs are, I must feed the joint. I must not allow inflammation to run rampant and to run wild, because inflammation breaks down joint structures. Weight issues are a huge issue. If I'm overweight, I will absolutely, there's a calculation that for every additional pound, you create X amount of torque per square inch, for example, on your knees. If you're 10 pounds overweight, you create X amount exponential. It continues to grow. Creates a tremendous amount of torque and distress and trauma over a very localized area. We've got to move joints. The more, quote, arthritic or inflamed that we become, it's not in your best interest to restrict. We actually should increase movements, but the types of movements, and that's where a physical therapist and a chiropractor, I believe, could help you in that area. Changes in hormones. As we age, as hormones decline, as hormones drop, not only does our skin externally become drier, and it affects women's internal organs, men's internal organs, but women especially susceptible to vaginal drying, thinning of the vaginal wall. The cells become thinner with hormone decline. It affects our brain. Neurologically, we're affected by changes and drops in hormones, but also our joints as well. Hugely impacted by a change in hormones and decline in hormones. So we have some genetic tendencies. We have dispositions to make too many of these degradation or breakdown enzymes, which are not necessarily bad, but they run rampant. Many of us eat an inflammatory diet. We eat way too much in the way of processed foods, white sugars, white flours, not enough of foods that are anti-inflammatory and joint structure building. Joint structure building would be an anti-inflammatory foods with colors, vegetables, fruits, the dynamics of colors, blueberries, blackberries, cherries, broccoli. Eat foods with colors. They are naturally anti-inflammatory. They provide a significant amount of natural enzymes that help the body do the work of repair. Weight, if we're overweight, that's an issue. Listen to the metabolism and the weight teachings that we've done as well. Lastly, what I want to talk about this segment, and then in the next video I want to talk very explicitly about nutrients. What's the difference between glucosamines? Is there a difference between glucosamines? What about chondroitin? Are there differences in chondroitin? What about omega-3s? What about the ascorbates? What about MSM? What about SAMe? So then talk about more of a nutrient, and that's only the tip of the iceberg. There are other options. What about enzymes? But that will be the next layer. How do we use nutrients? This one, understand there could be mechanical issues, understand there are joint issues, understand there's enzyme degradation, understand that weight can play a huge role, and understand that the diet plays a huge role as well. The more good oils and fats that I consume, the less white, refined, and processed that I consume, the more colors, vegetables, and fruits that I consume that are real and live, the less deep-fried foods. Deep-fried sugars, white and refined, produce inflammation. Part of a joint breaking down is an inflammatory process. It must start with your diet. I could get into a lot of technical things about alkalinization and so on, but I believe it's an anti-inflammatory / Mediterranean type diet. Lots of good oils, lots of good fats, fresh vegetables, fresh fruits, fish, chicken, free range, preferably organic, lean meats and beefs, preferably, absolutely, predominantly grass-fed and organic. Folks, this is our first set in joint health prevention. A lot of this was about prevention. How do we be proactive in teaching on joint health, preserving your joints. We will talk a little bit specifically about nutrients and the role that nutrients play. Stay tuned for part 2.